Purdue University Extension Building at the Indiana State Fairgrounds, featuring the Democrat, Republican, and Libertarian candidates on the ballot this November for the office of Lieutenant Governor. This debate is hosted by AgrIInstitute, and the live stream is produced by Hoosier Ag Today. To get the event started, here is Melissa Profit of partnering sponsor Ice Miller LLP.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2024 Indiana Lieutenant Governor's Debate. Thank you so much for investing your time today to hear from the individuals nominated by their respective parties to seek the office of Indiana's 53rd Lieutenant Governor. We welcome everyone in this room and all who are watching this debate online and at watch parties. I'm Melissa Profit, partner at Ice Miller, founder and chair of our Food and Agribusiness Group and Energy Group, and former managing partner. Ice Miller is honored to partner with AgrIInstitute in support of today's important debate. We are pleased to be joined by Country Mark, Indiana Farm Bureau, Indiana Corn Growers, and Indiana Soybean Alliance as sponsors. It is completely fitting that today's debate is being held here at the Indiana State Fairgrounds during the Great Indiana State Fair, the showcase of Indiana agriculture. We are so appreciative of Hoosier Ag Today for making it possible for everyone around the state to be able to attend virtually. Ice Miller is committed to helping Indiana citizens be well-informed decision makers as they cast their votes this November. Our Lieutenant Governor oversees the Indiana Department of Agriculture, Office of Community and Rural Affairs, the Office of Energy Development, and many other key statutory duties that impact Hoosiers, especially those in agricultural and rural communities. The leadership of the Lieutenant Governor is critical to the advancement of Indiana's agricultural industry and rural communities. In a few minutes, each candidate will respond to questions presented by our esteemed panel. The 2024 candidates, Micah Beckwith, Republican, Terry Goodin, Democrat, and Tonya Hudson, Independent, will share their views and proposals for addressing some of the most important matters facing Indiana's rural and agricultural communities. It is a great honor for me to introduce my good friend, Gerry Dick, to share his talent and expertise as moderator of today's debate. Gerry serves as president of Inside Indiana Business, a division of IBJ Media Corp. Gerry is a frequent keynote speaker and moderator on issues related to Indiana business and Indiana's economy. He is a well-decorated journalist and has earned a solid reputation for his business acumen. Among his many talents, Gerry is a seasoned moderator of the Lieutenant Governor debate, 6, I think, so far. So let's get this debate started. Please welcome Gerry to the stage.
Thank you, Melissa, very much, and good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure on behalf of everyone at Inside Indiana Business and IBJ Media as well to host this Lieutenant Governor debate that is hosted by AgrIInstitute. You know, today's event is one really important way that the members of Indiana's ag community and rural communities throughout the state of Indiana can become better informed about the decisions that they will make in November. So it's great to see a packed house here at the Indiana State Fairgrounds, and I know a big crowd online as well. AgrIInstitute is a leadership development and people capacity building organization committed to seeding knowledge, growing skills, nurturing passion, and also connecting leaders in agriculture and rural communities around the state of Indiana. The work of AgrIInstitute is supported by individuals and corporate investors as well. In addition to today's partnering sponsor, Ice Miller LLP, we want to recognize Country Mark, Indiana Farm Bureau, and the Indiana Soybean Alliance and Indiana Corn Growers Association. And if representatives from those organizations could stand and be recognized, that would be great. Thank you very much for your support. And a very big thank you, as Melissa said, to the Indiana State Fair, the Indiana State Fairgrounds for hosting this event, providing this venue and the staging for this Lieutenant Governor debate. So now let's introduce, and this is one occasion where you can clap as your candidate comes to the stage. Introduce the candidates who are here today. We begin with Democrat Terry Goodin. We also have Libertarian candidate Tonya Hudson. And Republican candidate Micah Beckwith. We're also fortunate to have a great panel to throw some questions the candidates' way. I'm pleased to be joined today on the panel by Eric Pfeiffer from Hoosier Ag Today, John Ketzenberger from the Nature Conservancy, Allison Lund from Indiana Prairie Farmer, and David Harden from Harden Farms. Thank you for being here. Okay, let's quickly go through the debate rules, and then we'll get underway here. The order of presentation will be Micah Beckwith with first opening statement, first question, and first closing statement. Tonya Hudson with the second opening statement, second question, and second closing statement. And Terry Goodin with the third opening statement, third question, and third closing statement. Each candidate will have up to 2.5 minutes for an opening statement, 2.5 minutes for a closing statement as well. Each candidate receives 1.5 minutes to answer each question. Each question will be answered by candidates in the same order, rotating who will be first, who will answer first. A 15-second rebuttal will be allowed only if the opposing candidate directly mentions the opposing candidate or candidate's party by name. The rotation will continue throughout the question and response period. Time will be monitored by the timekeeper. Beth, I know you're ready to go with the flashcards there, and to keep us on time. We'll notify each of the candidates of 30 seconds remaining, 15 seconds, 5 seconds, and time up. The speaker will be allowed to finish their sentence. Speaker can be interrupted by the moderator following the third conjunction. I think I remember that from high school English. I'm not sure though. There will be no audience participation. Candidates are not allowed to reference members of the audience or anyone in the peripheral area other than a spouse. No one from the audience will be allowed to ask a question. Either audience, and this is important, audience asked to refrain and are not allowed to clap, cheer, display signs, or otherwise participate in the program. I know we won't have to do this, but anyone causing or participating in disruptive behavior will be escorted from the room. So with that, and again, no distribution of campaign materials here as well. So with that, let's begin with opening statements. And that is Micah Beckwith.
All right. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, AgrIInstitute, and the moderators and all of our sponsors here today. It is a joy to be with you all. Indiana's economy, the bedrock of that economy is our agriculture. It's the corn, the soybeans, Indiana oak, and everything in between. And I am proud to call Indiana home. You know, a friend of mine was telling me the other day that that food security is national security. It is so important that Indiana begins to be that number one breadbasket for the state, or for the nation, and for the world. And we're looking forward to moving in that direction. I know every candidate here today is excited to help push that down the field. But my background is growing up in the dairy industry. My grandpa, my dad were pioneers in the dairy world, and my dad created Moose Tracks ice cream, so we got to be in a really sweet industry. Anyone? All right. Okay. Good. All right. No, but it was living in that world. I learned the value of a hard work ethic. I learned the value of working with dairy farmers around the Midwest and around the country. And I saw the faith and family values that undergird that entire industry. And I believe that faith and family values are what make Indiana Ag so powerful. I know that the Braun Beckwith initiative is going to be getting the government out of the way so you can farm, making sure that you have a legacy that you can pass on to your children and children's children. It is so hard right now as farmers to be able to carry on that tradition because you have inflation. You have incredible restraints that government is putting on our farmers. And what the Braun Beckwith initiative is going to do is going to cut through those restraints, going to give you the freedom to just do what God has gifted you to do. And that's to farm. That's to dream big, to have great vision. And I love when I see people in Indiana walking in their God-given talents that way. So as your lieutenant governor, I will make sure the government works for you and not against you. I hate it when the government gets in the way. So we're going to create the runway. We're going to help you get the plane off the ground, and you're going to soar to heights that you've never even dreamt possible. And that's going to be my goal as lieutenant governor. So I have a beautiful bride who's right down here, Susan. Thank you for being here. And we have two wonderful little kids. And I understand the value of making Indiana a state where for generations to come, there's liberty and freedom for everyone. And I look forward to serving as your next lieutenant governor. Thank you very much.
All right, next we have Tonya Hudson for opening statement.
Yes, and I want to thank the AgrIInstitute for organizing this debate and inviting me. And I also want to thank the panelists and the moderator for taking time out of your schedules to participate in this election process. Also to the people watching, every vote counts and your participation matters. So I'm Tonya Hudson. I'm a mother, grandmother, and also a local real estate broker. And I want to live in a free state. I want my family, my friends, fellow Hoosiers to have the same freedoms I long for. One of the reasons why I ran for lieutenant governor to be Donald Rainwater's running mate is because of his plans and his vision to make Indiana a better place to live. We need better government, not bigger. So with that, I'm looking forward to talking more about agriculture, as well as our plan to reform tax codes and abolish the property taxes, because you deserve to have more money in your pocket. Thank you.
All right, Terry Goodin, 2.5 minutes opening statement.
All right, thank you, Gary. I want to say thank you to the moderators and all you folks for being here. This is wonderful. This is a great crowd, and thank you again for being here. I want to say hello to my wife over here as well, and I've got the two young sons, Burley and Brown, and also a daughter, Grace, and my mom and dad are listening at home, so I want to say hello to mom and dad. So thank you all for being here. Folks, hello. I'm Terry Goodin, the Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor in the great state of Indiana. I'm running with former Republican Jennifer McCormick, who was the last truly elected superintendent of public instruction. Folks, together, we're going to restore dignity, we're going to restore common sense, and we're going to restore balance back to Indiana government. We're going to do that by working on issues that matter, like education. We'll put together an education plan that will make sure that every single student will graduate with a diploma where they can get a great job, where they can join the military, or else they can continue that education after school and going to college. We're going to bring great jobs to the state of Indiana. Great jobs. We will make sure that when corporations come to our state and they ask for tax incentives or tax breaks, we're going to require that they pay a living wage. Folks, listen to me when I say this. No Hoosier should ever work a full-time job and still live in poverty. Folks, we're going to start a revival in rural Indiana, an economic revival. We're going to embark on a huge infrastructure program where these communities will have the ability, the revival of opportunity, hope, and optimism. Folks, it's time to restore our rural communities back to their grandeur that they once were. Finally, folks, we've just got to be serious here. The last 20 years, the state of Indiana has been controlled by one party. They have been in charge of our property taxes. Folks, they have failed. The McCormick Goodin ticket is going to put together a property tax plan that's fair to everyone in the state of Indiana, so Hoosier families and Hoosier farmers can stay in their homes and on their farms and not have to worry about paying high property taxes. In closing, folks, I'm plain spoken. Everybody knows that. I always have been. Folks, I'll leave the political pontifications and the innuendos to my opponents. I'm going to do what my grandfather said. My grandfather always said that, hey, Terry, always wear your religion in your heart and practice your religion in your heart. Don't wear it on your sleeve. And we're going to continue to make sure Indiana is a great place to live, work, and raise a family. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, candidates one and all. Time now for questions. The first question will go to Micah Beckwith, and that comes from Eric Pfeiffer. Eric.
Thank you very much, Gary. And I'm glad that property taxes were brought up. If you've been listening to the Indiana Ag Policy podcast that I host, you would know that this one's coming, because property taxes will be the number one issue that farm organizations like Farm Bureau, the Indiana Corn Growers Association, and Indiana Soybean Alliance take into the 2025 legislative session. One, do you believe farmers are unfairly treated under the current property tax formula because their profession simply requires more land? And what do you see as a potential solution? Can you give us some details on your property tax plan?
Yeah, so yes, they are. Farmers have seen an increase from last year to this year, 26.2% increase in property taxes. That's insane. That's absolutely out of control. And farmers need the relief. The Braun Beckwith plan is going to bring that relief to farmers. We're going to make sure that they have, that never again will you ever be able to outpace economic growth of an area. Mike Braun launched this plan that says 3% is going to be the cap. It can't grow 26% in a year. We're going to grow with economic stability. We're going to make sure that farmers are not seeing these wide swaths of just huge jumps in their property taxes. Really, to me, ultimately, though, it's the legislature's job to fix it. And what Mike Braun has done with casting vision, he's given the legislature cover finally to fix this issue. I've been an outspoken critic of the Republican Party for not addressing tough issues. And this is one of them. I've been speaking very, very often on property taxes. Really, truly, it's not your property if you have to pay the government rent to stay there. And you got guys like J.D. Prescott, Scott Alexander. You have people like Jeff Thompson and Travis Holdman in the legislature that now have the cover because of Mike Braun giving them the freedom to go out and tackle this issue. And I know they're going to come up with a great solution. Mike's going to cast vision. I'm going to cast vision, and we're going to get it done so that way you can stay in your home, stay in your farms, and pass on a legacy to your children.
All right, next question goes to Tonya Hudson from John Ketzenberger.
Thank you, Gary. Ms. Hudson, the water, we're talking about property taxes in agriculture. Water is the most precious resource any Hoosier has. We've seen with the program at the LEAP project in Lebanon, possibly transferring water from Lafayette to that area, that economic development has played a big role in water. Indiana has very little water policy. My question for you is, how would you balance the needs for water and with agriculture and economic development, especially in a changing climate that we have?
Okay, thank you for that question. Yes, water shouldn't have to be a commodity because it's a necessary thing we all have to have in our lives. I would, as Lieutenant Governor, work with the legislators to improve the policy in that regard. You were talking about fair and balanced, and we do need to do that. We are stewards of the earth. We need to make sure we have clean water and clean air, and work to make sure our pollution and that sort of thing, runoff, chemical runoffs, doesn't get into our water supply. So working with the legislators on that is what I would do as Lieutenant Governor. Thank you.
Next question from David Harden goes to, I'm sorry, Allison Lund, my fault. Allison Lund to Terry Goodin.
Thank you, Gary. So we've noticed in the last few years in Indiana that renewable energy, specifically solar, has just sort of taken off. So with this extensive commercial solar development in the state, what measures are you going to take to protect rural communities while also upholding landowner rights?
All right, thank you, Allison. That's a great topic, and it's very timely as well. So with that, we're talking about solar energy. For centuries, the farming industry has been involved with the transportation industry in America. We talk about they grew the oats and the corn for the horses that help transport the goods. We now grow the fuel that we turn into ethanol, which is also involved with the transportation industry. And we're going to figure out a way. We're going to figure out a way how do farmers get involved with the transportation industry, with electricity and solar farms. But what we've got to do is this first, folks. We've got to figure out what sources of areas where we need this infrastructure and this electricity. So as we work forward and working to put together a great plan in Indiana, we have to do a couple of things. Number one, we have to get the people that are going to be impacted the most involved in the process. What we've had in the last 20 years in Indiana is we've had a non-transparent government, a government that does not let folks know what's going on in our state. So in other words, what we have is when we have fixes, we have Band-Aid fixes that don't work. So what we have got to do is we got to bring together the farmers, we got to bring together landowners, we got to bring together local governments, we got to bring the state together. Everyone needs to sit down at the table and figure out what moving forward does this solar energy process look like. And in closing, I'll say this. We also have to keep in mind of what the next resource or what the next new invention might be for energy. In 10 years, who knows what may happen? Solar energy may become outdated, and it may not necessarily be an energy that we can rely on and depend on. So thank you.
All right, next question from David Harden for Tonya Hudson.
Thank you, Gary. Farmers' margins in Indiana have been falling dramatically over the last couple of years. Previous administrations have pushed programs like the Indiana Grown program and conducted foreign trade missions to help producers capture a larger share of the consumer's dollar. What role does state government have in ensuring profitability for Indiana's farmers, and what policies would you champion as Lieutenant Governor?
Thank you for that question. The Indiana Department of Agriculture is one of the biggest agencies the Lieutenant Governor oversees. And I'm looking at the future, and the future is with our youth. And I think that if we can teach our youth to invest more time in crop management, we have a great program at Purdue University with the agriculture program there. And I would like to see more students work as interns with the farmers, and also at high schools have food awareness programs so that kids understand that food doesn't just magically appear in the stores. And maybe they could have gardening programs to grow and appreciate what they're growing and take pride in that, so that they can have food at their own cafeterias. The FFA, the Farmers, Future Youth Farmers Association, they work with young people on techniques and science to improve crop management, and I would encourage that.
John Ketzenberger for Terry Goodin.
Thank you. Terry, I would like to know what your position on the balance between water and agriculture and economic development, and what Indiana should do in terms of a policy when it comes to our most precious resource.
John, thank you so much for that question. And we have to create a balance. And there's been many wars in the past fought over oil, as we know. One of the most precious commodities that there will be wars fought over in the future will probably be water. So Indiana needs to get together. We need to put together a policy of all those folks who are impacted by the use of water, and make sure that we put the right process together moving forward. And I'll tell you this, something else, John, we've got to quit polluting our streams in the state of Indiana. We've got to come up with guidelines that will tell people, hey, you can't dump a battery acid in the river next door, okay? It's a shame. It's a shame that Midwestern states shipped hazardous material to the state of Indiana after a train wreck in Northern Ohio. Indiana was the recipient of all of those hazardous materials. Now, we've got to stop and think, wait a minute, something there is just not right. We've got to put together a plan where Indiana can remain sustainable, because if we don't, we're not going to have a state here for our kids to be able to enjoy later.
Allison Lund for Micah Beckwith.
Thank you. Micah, as farmers continue to face low commodity prices and rising input costs, how will you protect young farmers and ensure that they have a future in the industry?
It's a great question. So I think right now we're seeing a very concerning thing in our state. 350,000 acres of land over the last 10 years has been lost. It's been redeveloped. The profitability, the margins are not there. Families want to pass down the small farm to next generation. But again, we're not giving them the proper tools when it comes to what they need to survive. And I think that's really just the government get out of the way. And I love what Ronald Reagan said. He said, government is not the answer to the problem. Government is the problem. And so if you can just let the strings of ingenuity just prosper and get the government out of the way, you're going to see a lot more sustainability for our future farmers. And parents are going to be able to pass down the farms. Kids are going to want to take the farms. Right now, you're seeing kids saying, well, man, mom and dad are struggling, and I've seen them struggle. I don't know if I want that life. And we've got to make it exciting. We've got to make it fun. We've got to bring technology into this. I mean, it's really an all of the above approach. And that's what I'm going to do as Lieutenant Governor, is make sure that farming is exciting. It's a venture that the next generation wants to go down and continue on the tradition. And I've been in youth ministry for a long time. I love working with students. I love seeing them unleash their God-given potential. And I look forward to doing that in the agriculture world as well, because I think it's really important that legacy lives on here in Indiana.
David Harden, your question for Terry Goodin.
Indiana has been a leader in the promotion and adoption of soil and water conservation and climate smart practices such as cover crops. Is it an appropriate mission
try to promote good farming practices, to try to promote conservation? And we can do that in a very, very practical way. We can do that in a way where we can partner with the federal government to draw federal dollars down. Right now, the state of Indiana is not leveraging the potential of money it can draw down from the federal government. We need to make sure that we get the most we can get from DC. Folks, we can also look, as we move forward on conservation, is a simple fact, as I said earlier, we've got to figure out a way to stop the pollution and to stop Indiana from being a dumping grounds for the Midwest. We've got to figure out a way to move Indiana forward. Conservation must be a priority as we move forward. We have to make sure that we've got clean water. We've got to make sure that we've got clean air to breathe for our children as they grow up and become everyday Hoosiers. I'm going to say this, folks. What's so disappointing is we talk about exports. Right now, one of the biggest exports that Indiana has is our young adults. We need to stop the export of young adults from Indiana. We've got to create opportunities in Indiana for these young adults to be able to succeed, and they want to succeed in a state that is clean and conservation-minded. Thank you.
Next question from Eric Pfeiffer for Micah Beckwith.
Recently, the Indiana State Department of Agriculture released a report about lost farmland. And that report showed around 345,000 acres of farmland lost between 2010 and 2022. Though that same report showed that crop production was up. So, one, does this report concern you that we lost all that farmland? And if it does, what should be done about it?
Yeah, well, I think it does concern me. And that's what I mentioned earlier, the 350,000 acres there. And we need to make sure that we are not giving selling our soul because the highest bidders coming in with redevelopment dollars that basically say, give us your farmland and we're going to put, all kinds of renewables on it, or all kinds of just new apartments on it. And I'm an ardent supporter of property rights, but at the same time, we're incentivizing bad behavior for some of these big conglomerates to come in, get all these tax abatements. Mom and dad who own the farm can't turn that down because they're living on a dime. And we need to make sure that incentive there to basically it's a hostile takeover of our farmland. We can't keep incentivizing that as the government. And so one of the things I love saying, the free market is the way to go. I love the free market, but don't let the government pick winners and losers. And that's what's happening right now. That's why we're losing that farmland. It's because government's picking winners and losers, incentivizing bad behavior, not helping the small farms live to see the next generation in. And so again, as Lieutenant Governor, I will always have the farmer on my mind. I'm not going to go to war against the farmer. I'm going to go to war against the machine that's hurting the farmer. So that's my mindset. That's my philosophy. And that's what I'll bring to the Lieutenant Governor's office.
And the next question from Allison Lund for Tonya Hudson.
Thank you, Gary. Tonya, there are still large gaps in rural connectivity. How will you expand rural broadband capabilities so these residents in rural communities can be on the grid?
OCRA, the Office of Community and Rural Affairs, has had grant programs it's been going on for a few years now, where fiber optics and broadband has been going to rural areas. I know in Lawrence County, they're getting ready to do that. In Orange County, they've already installed. So it's already on the move. The money's already been appropriated and approved by our legislators. So as Lieutenant Governor, I would continue to support them finishing the job so that they can get those cables buried and that our rural areas can be connected to the internet. I think they are on the final phase of that program. So it'll probably be over the next year that process will continue with broadband.
Okay, David Harden, you're up next for Micah Beckwith.
Micah, many rural communities in the state have experienced population loss due to such factors as lack of employment, housing shortage, degraded infrastructure. And as you know, this leads to loss of the property tax base and a vicious downward spiral. What policies or initiatives would the Braun-Beckwith administration put in place to keep Indiana's rural communities viable?
Well, I think it's twofold. I think it's working with OCRA, like Tonya was mentioning there, and that small Main Street Indiana heart. I mean, we've got some amazing potential in some of our downtown areas and some of these smaller towns. They just need a little bit of help. And so, but it's also taking IEDC. IEDC right now is a shadow government. It's running out of control. It's only picking winners of big corporate conglomerates. And what I'd love to see, and I've talked to Mike Braun about this, and he agrees, that we want to start seeing IEDC move into that smaller town. Let's have a holistic state approach. We're not going to pick one area and just pour our resources in one area. We're going to look at the whole state. We're going to bring this amazing tradition of Main Street America that Indiana is so proud of. We're going to bring it back to fruition. So people want to go to these small towns. I mean, I think of like a Hartford City, such great potential there. They just need a little bit of help. And I think through IDC, through OCRA, we can do that. We can expand broadband. We can make sure that they have access to a global marketplace. And you're going to see not only farms, but small businesses in these rural communities come back to life. And it's really going to make Indiana a destination for the world.
Next question for Tonya Hudson from Eric Pfeiffer.
So you mentioned during your opening statements that your plan is to eliminate the property tax. So I'm going to get a little bit deeper with you, because farmers, from what I can tell, are still very passionate about taxes. When you take one away, you've got to put it somewhere else. They still want taxes to make sure that their rural communities are vibrant. That the taxes have to go toward police, fire, other things. So what is the plan to make sure that those rural communities stay vibrant for them? If you're eliminating that tax, where is the tax coming from then, so that those rural communities stay vibrant for these farmers and their rural communities?
Okay, I want to first start by saying our legacy family farmers are parceling off part of their land to sell to get money to make ends meet. Times are hard for everybody, farmers and Hoosier, small businesses. The tax plan is to abolish property taxes, because you should not be paying property taxes on a home that you already own, whether you're a farmer or a senior citizen living on Social Security and barely making ends meet, and your property taxes go up and you can't pay them. And then we have this mafia style tactic where through sheriff's sale or whatever, if you can't pay your property taxes, you get kicked out of the home that you own. We should not be doing that. The plan is, instead of property taxes, when you buy a home, you pay a 7% sales tax, 7%. If you can't afford the 7% at closing, you can pay 1% a year for 7 years. The communities, local communities would get together, the municipalities, and to work out what is the budget, how can we pay our fire and police. Tourist cities do this all over the country, and they figure out a way to have the fees to cover those costs without burdening the homeowners with unfair property taxes. It's got to stop, and under Rainwater administration, we're going to fix that.
John Kitzenberger, your question for Terry Goodin.
Thank you. Terry, would you and your administration support a dedicated funding stream for conservation, such as a fraction of the sales tax from the sale of outdoor goods like fishing poles and camping gear, to fund programs like Clean Water Indiana, the Harrison Conservation Trust, or the conservation farming practices that were mentioned earlier?
The answer is yes. So, but it's a little more complicated than that, John, as we know, because I appreciate my opponent admitting that for the last 20 years, this one-party rule has put Indiana in dire straits, and they are picking winners and losers. And that should not be the case, because here's the situation. They have picked conservation as one of those losers. And what we've got to do is we've got to repair the property tax system. We've got to put everything together, all those taxes together. We come out and we figure out what is the most important priorities that we have in the state of Indiana. Now, it's very simple, folks. It's very simple. If you want to have good quality services, you have to pay for them. Now, you just have to determine who is that pays for that. Is that the local government or is that state government? Well, here's the situation. My opponent and his partner has presented a property tax plan that will increase your taxes, because what they don't understand is when you cut taxes at the local level, you don't cut taxes, you actually shift those taxes. Folks, let me tell you this. There is no economist in this world that will tell you that you can cut your way out of a property tax crisis. They will tell you you have to grow your way out of a property tax crisis. And what we'll do in Indiana under a McCormick Goodin administration is we will grow Indiana out of this property tax crisis. In the meantime, we'll find new ways and new sources of revenue to be able to fund conservation programs, just like you said, John. Thank you.
David Harden, your question for Tonya Hudson.
Can I give 15-second response?
Yeah, you can.
Is that all right?
Yep.
So real quick. So you got somebody that's defending the machine, saying government needs to spend. I'm going to say government can tighten its belt. Government needs to tighten its belt, because we're all tightening our belt under a Biden-Harris inflationomics that's going through the roof. And so it's been the Democrats that's created this problem, and it's time for the government to live like the rest of us are living. So
time. Yep. Okay, David, your question for Tonya Hudson.
Yes, thank you. Tonya, land use for renewable energy projects can be very contentious. What is the right balance to strike between local control and the need for increased renewable energy production in the state, as we see a majority of our coal-fired electricity generation come offline in the next few years?
Well, that definitely is a balance there. Libertarians are for the free market principle, and I see and hear from both sides of the argument regarding solar panels. I think that if the solar producers implement their panels in an appropriate manner, safe, to where they're not harming their communities, farmers can do what they want with their land. It's their land. And if you have solar panels, which I'm told it's just only on a small percentage of large farmland, along with the sheep grazing, that can be an economic benefit to the local communities. But like I said, the producers need to be mindful of not to harm their communities, and I think they are trying to do that. We do need alternative electricity, but government should stay out of the way and not dictate how the farmers use their land.
Eric, your question for Terry Goodin.
Let's go back to property taxes, Terry. I'll give you a shot at this. You already mentioned your plans to grow. If you would provide your specific plans for growth under your property tax plan.
Yes, sir. Well, right now, as we work on a very, very significant plan that's going to cut property taxes to those who pay them, we've also got to realize that we can't cut services as well, because the plan that was presented by Micah and his partner was a plan that was put together, knee-jerk reaction. All right, it was put together quickly. They did not take into account, unless there was some covert reason, that they wanted to defund police, they wanted to defund fire departments, they wanted to defund ambulance services, and they wanted to cut funding to our local schools. Hopefully, that was not the purpose of that property tax plan. As we move forward, we will sit down and we will look and see what kind of money the state of Indiana needs, how's the state of Indiana replace property taxes that are cut at the local level? Because if state government is going to cut property taxes, which is a local tax, as you know, then state government should have to replace that tax or the cut that they make. So it's easy for state politicians to sit up here and say, well, we're going to cut your property taxes. We're going to lower your property taxes. Guess what? Property taxes are 100% local. It's easy for those folks to say that. What they need to say is we're going to quit making cuts to your property tax until we find out what we can do to lower your property taxes, and that is through growth. We're going to present opportunities in rural communities where they can grow and they can grow themselves out of these property tax crises that we're in. We've got crisis after crisis here that's been created by one-party rule in the last 20 years. And at the top of that priority list right now is the crisis in property taxes. A McCormick Goodin team will fix this problem.
Can I give him 15 seconds?
15.
All right, great. All right. So
Called you out, 15.
All right. Last time I checked, the Democrat Party is the party of defund the police, not the Republican Party. And we will make sure that you have all of the money necessary to carry out the duties of local government. We're not going to let that, but it's not the government's property. It's your property. And that's why unconstitutional. There we go. All right, good.
All right, John Katzenberger, your question for Micah Beckwith.
Thank you, Gerry. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I would like to get everyone on record of this one question about water. So to paraphrase, there's a balance needed for agriculture, economic development, and Hoosiers in general. And how in the wake of facing a changing climate, how would you find that balance, and what would you do as an administration to make sure that balance is carried out?
Well, I think it's a transparency issue. I think if you look at what's happened with the LEAP district and how that has just kind of run off the rails, it's because really there was no transparency. I think, again, you have a shadow government. You have a government that through the IEDC that's kind of been picking winners and losers. And I know it frustrates me to no end, and it frustrates Mike Braun as well. And one of the things we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, listen, the locals need to be intimately involved in this. They need to know what's going on from day one. We're not going to pick those winners and losers on a large scale. We're going to go to the locals. We're going to make sure home rule still lives well and free in Indiana. But I think we've got the resources. It's more just how are we going to get those resources into the right place? You know, God's given Indiana some amazing just resources all over our state. And we can do it. I fully am confident of that. I mean, when we put our minds together, when we work with the 150 legislators down at the State House, when you bring the executive branch in, there's a lot of passionate, good-hearted people in government that want to make sure that it's done well and it's done right so that we can grow local economies, we can grow small towns, and the whole state prospers and benefits because of that. So I really believe we can do it. It's just got to start with transparency.
Terry Goodin up next with a question from Allison Lund.
Thank you, Gerry. Terry, mental health in the agriculture industry has faced a series of lows over the past decade. What resources or programs will you provide or support so we don't have to lose another farmer?
Well, thank you very much for bringing that up. And that's going to be in my closing statement, so I have to change that. But you are correct. What's happened in the last 20 years at least is the government or the group that's been in charge of our government in the state of Indiana has forgotten folks that live in rural areas when it comes to mental health. As a matter of fact, they have consolidated the mental health services that we have into just very small clusters within urban areas, the urban areas of our state. It's very difficult for rural folks to be able to get to those services in those rural areas. The state of Indiana has got to start recognizing mental health providers as a provider of health. Right now, the state of Indiana does not do that, and that is a true oxymoron. We've got to figure out ways to reach out. We have to have outreach to our farmers, and we got to figure out ways. How do we get those farmers? Remember, farmers are independent types, right? I'm one of them. We're independent types. It's tough for a farmer to ask for help. We have to put the services together. We've got to put programs together where folks can go out and talk to farmers and get them the help that they need. And you cannot do that. You cannot do that by continuing to cut services and cut funds in the state of Indiana. As my opponent pointed out, my party is the party that wants to defund police, but I have seen not one proposal from the Democrats that said they want to cut local services. Guess what? His partner and himself have got a proposal that will cut police, it'll cut fire, It'll cut emergency services to your home. Thank you.
Up next, Eric.
Okay.
15. Well,
I just,
your opponent, yeah.
just a reminder, they haven't put out a proposal yet. So there is nothing there. So we're taking the lead. The Republicans are saying, hey, this is the vision. This is where we're going. So we've got the proposal. We're the ones casting vision.
All right, Eric, how about your question for Micah Beckwith?
It's been said to me by farmers and farm organizations that Indiana, despite our natural ability to produce corn and soybeans for ethanol and biodiesel, that we're woefully behind in terms of policy to actually support them. Legislation will be introduced this year to provide tax incentives to retailers who install pumps to offer those products. We have seen a lot of growth here in Indiana in recent years in electric vehicle battery production. Speaking specifically now to ethanol, do you support higher blends of ethanol as part of the solution moving forward to lower carbon emissions, or do you believe electric is the way of the future?
Well, I definitely support higher blends of ethanol. I mean, that really goes a long way in our agriculture world. So we want to fight for that. Ethanol is a great way to make sure we're having clean energy. It's to preserves our environment. I'm not a climate cultist. I believe that God is the one who has given us the climate. We should be good stewards of it. But I also believe that we're not going to be the ones to destroy this environment. But when it comes to ethanol, one of the things right now, people are being limited by what the government is the handcuffs the government's putting on. So when it comes to 88, instead of going, even just jumping up from 87 to 88, it's a government roadblock. And so if we get the government out of the way, that will increase so much more ethanol production in the state of Indiana. Aviation fluid is another amazing frontier that the federal government is hampering that. And we've got biodiesels that could really go a long way when it comes to aviation fuel. And Indiana could be a leader in that, but it's going to have to take the state fighting the federal government, say, get out of the way, let us be innovative, and let us go down that path. And so that's what we'll do. As I'll do that as Lieutenant Governor, and Mike Braun will do that as well.
All right, up next, John Ketzenberger, your question for Tonya Hudson.
Thank you, Gary. Tonya, I want to ask you about the dedicated funding stream for conservation, which would be such as a fraction of the sales tax from the sale of outdoor goods. Would you favor this idea for the dedicated funding for conservation programs such as the Clean Water Indiana or conservation tillage practices and cover crops in rural Indiana?
I'm in favor of doing what the farmers need to have done. And I just want to go back to something that was just talked about. We have so much over-regulation in the state of Indiana, especially for our farmers in the agriculture. One of the problems that the farmers have is that their hands are tied behind their back with so much red tape. And we have our current legislators at the State House that are piling on the regulations. One of the industries that we need to focus on is industrial hemp. And there are so many products that can be used. Construction materials, hempcrete, which is a form of concrete from hemp, and also biodiesel. This hemp-derived fuel can be harvested very cheaply, and Indiana needs to buy this from our family farmers, and this would save taxpayers money. So go to rainwaterforindiana.com and look up the issues, and you can get more information on that. Thank you.
Allison Lund, your question for Micah Beckwith.
Thank you, Gary. Micah, I know we've talked a little bit about these 350,000 acres of farmland that have been lost between 2010 and 2022. However, there were about a dozen counties that did record gains in farmland. And an unintended consequence of that was large cities are seeing those gains and in some of those counties, and they're using that to justify future development. How will you manage those misguided beliefs?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately we're seeing a hostile takeover of our farmland. I mean, from big foreign-owned companies. I mean, we can talk about China right now. China coming in and buying up our farmland because they wanna hurt us. I mean, they're not our friend, they're not our ally in any capacity. And yet for many years, we just kind of gave them the red carpet treatment. Now, we did have a bill last year that went through the legislature. Representative Culp put that through to shore that up a little bit, but there are loopholes, and we've got to, China can still do it. They can create shadow companies. They can take more of our farmland. And so ultimately, like I said, that's one example of a hostile takeover. Corporations, foreign-owned corporations are coming into counties like Wells County, and they're offering $1,500 an acre. What farmer is going to be able to turn that down? But we're incentivizing that bad behavior. We're giving tax abatements to these foreign-owned companies. And so we've got to just make sure that we're not going to get in the way of the free market, but we're not going to incentivize bad behavior. Scripture says this in Romans. It says the purpose of government is to promote good and to punish evil. And when we start incentivizing bad behavior, we're going down the wrong path. What government should be doing. So we will protect our farmland. I will be an ardent supporter and defender of our farmland here in Indiana, and make sure we're promoting and incentivizing good behavior, not bad.
And up next, Tonya Hudson with a question from David Harden.
Yes, Tonya, what steps would your administration take to ensure that in Indiana we have a stable, trained, and competent labor pool to fill the needs of, an agricultural industry that we all hope to be, one of the main economic engines of our state?
Okay. Again, we need to rely on free market principles and get government out of the way. It would be nice if more of our students that graduate in Indiana stay in Indiana. But who wants to live in Indiana with the high property taxes and the high income tax? So if you go to rainwaterforindiana.com, those issues are discussed in detail. And we want to make Indiana a better place to live with the lower taxes. And that's where we need to go. And free market principles will also address the other forces with our economic situation.
Very good. And for our final question, before we get to closing statements, we go to Eric Pfeiffer and Terry Goodin.
Terry, I want to bring back this discussion on ethanol and this bill that will be introduced. One, would you support the bill that would provide tax incentives for retailers to provide more options for the public to get higher ethanol blends? And your take on the future of higher ethanol blends versus electric vehicles?
Yeah, thank you very much, Eric. Very, very good question, and I'm glad you answered. But first off, I want to find some of that $1,500 an acre ground, because I want to buy all of it. So, with that, as we move forward, Article 8 of our Indiana Constitution talks about education, and you can't have progress in your state without good education. Okay. So what I talked about earlier with opportunities to move forward with different energy sources, as Allison asked us, what my dream is and what my hope is we don't just have 10% ethanol. What I would love to be able to see is for our scientists to continue to push where all of the fuel can be made from corn and soybeans. And that's what I'm talking about, growth on the family farm. So as we work forward in Indiana, as we move forward in Indiana, we have to figure out those ways. Okay, how do we incentivize folks to study this? How do we incentivize folks to grow a certain type of corn, because it's not as valuable as this corn, to be able to determine whether or not we can use that for fuel? So there are a lot of ways we can look at this. Purdue University, folks, I'm an IU grad, so I hate to say this, but Purdue University, they produce some of the best farming scientists in the world. And what we've got to have in Indiana is we have to work closely with our universities to make sure that we're putting together a program and moving a program forward so we can make Indiana a great place to live, work, and raise a family, and so we can become self-sufficient on energy, as Allison said before when we were talking about the solar panels.
Well, with that, candidates, thank you for some great perspectives, some great answers to some great questions from our panel. We are now at closing remarks. Each of you will have up to 2.5 minutes for those closing remarks, and we begin with Micah Beckwith.
Well, thank you again. State Fair Board, you've put on an amazing fair. It is the best fair in the nation. I want to thank again our moderators and our sponsors. It's been a terrific event. And thank you for coming out. All of you, you're taking interest in our republic, and that's the first step in having a strong nation, is for an educated populace. And so this has been fantastic. So just want to say thank you. You know, I'm reminded in Hosea 4:6, it says, "Where there is no vision, the people perish, and the people perish for lack of knowledge," is what Hosea 4:6 says. And I believe that the vision that we need right now is for a bright future, a future that will produce prosperous results for family farms, for the small farmer, not just for the big conglomerates that are coming in. And I think we can do that collectively. It's going to take teamwork. It's going to take reaching across the aisle. It's going to take extending olive branches. It's going to take us all coming around the fact that Indiana agriculture is worth fighting for. And I know the Braun Beckwith administration will be that warrior. I look at the Republican ticket right now, all the way from the top, all the way down. You got some fighters. You got people that will fight for what they believe in. They're going to fight for your families. They're not going to get pushed aside by the cancel culture when the cancel culture starts threatening them. They're going to go to bat for you and your children and children's children. And I think that's what Indiana is going to be for the nation. You know, Ronald Reagan said that America is a city on a hill. But I think America now needs that city on a hill. And I think Indiana can be that city on a hill. I don't think it's a coincidence that we're called the Heartland. If you revive the heart, you revive the body. And I think that's what's happening here. There is an absolute revival happening within our communities of faith and family values. And so the Braun Beckwith administration is going to stand for what's right. We're going to fight for what's right, and we will not back down, and we will make sure that Indiana goes on to show the rest of the nation how conservative principles, Republican principles, can create an amazing future for you and your family. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Closing remarks, 2.5 minutes, Tonya Hudson.
Thank you. Ask yourself, what would you do if you had more money in your pocket? What would you do with that money? It's your hard-earned money. It's not Mike Braun's. It's not Jennifer McCormick's. It's your money. You have a right to spend your money the way you want to for your family and for yourself. We need to roll back the rules and regulations, cut taxes. Property taxes need to be abolished. You need to have more money, which will put a boost to the economy. If you're spending more money, that boosts the economy. And that's what we need to do. Give the money back to the people. Indiana's had a surplus. What does that mean? They overtaxed. With the Rainwater administration, we will roll that back. Come this next November, take control of your own lives. Let's roll it back and vote for Rainwater Hudson. That's the ticket to vote for. Thank you.
All right. And Terry Goodin, 2.5 minutes for your closing statement.
All right, thank you, Gary. And folks, I am proud to be able to say that I still work the farm that I grew up on. And I think it's very important that Indiana has a Secretary of Agriculture, which is the Lieutenant Governor, that knows that John Deere is not Bambi's uncle. All right? So we need to, as I've traveled around the state of Indiana in the last 3 years, folks, I talked to a lot of Hoosiers. And those Hoosiers told me this. They said, Terry, all we need is we just want the opportunity. We just want the opportunity to get a good job so we can raise our families with dignity. We want our children to be able to have a better future than what our present day is. Folks, we want our elected officials not to embarrass us in front of the world. And we want those elected leaders to follow the same rules, laws, and guidelines that every other Hoosier follows in the state of Indiana. Yeah. A McCormick Goodin ticket and McCormick Goodin administration will move Indiana forward, folks. It will move Indiana forward in a gazillion different directions. And as the way we look at it here, as we've heard from both of my opponents, and as we move forward and we move the state of Indiana forward, the McCormick Goodin ticket will create great jobs. It will improve our educational system. It will put in place a fair taxing system. Folks, the Goodin McCormick ticket will create a smarter, stronger, safer Indiana. So for that stronger, smarter, safer Indiana, folks, I ask that you support the McCormick Goodin ticket as we move forward, so Indiana can prosper and so we can become a great place to live, work, and raise a family. Thank you for listening. God bless Indiana and God bless America. Thank you.
Well, I know you've been holding it in, so how about a big round of applause for all of our candidates? Thank you. Thanks to each of you for being here, providing your perspective, and for running for public office as well, and for talking about some very important issues here today. On behalf of the Board of Directors and AgrIInstitute supporters, a big thank you for all of you for being here. For those of you online as well, thanks for joining us online. Thank you again to our supporters, Ice Miller, Country Mark, Indiana Farm Bureau, Indiana Soybean Alliance, and the Indiana Corn Growers Association. Big thank you to a great panel as well, Eric Pfeiffer, Allison Lund, John Ketzenberger, and David Harden. Thank you all. Have a great day at the fair. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you.
You know,